Hi everyone! Today I've got a process video and tutorial for you that showcases one of my favorite techniques using Nuvo Drops and using them to create water droplets. I'm also pairing this technique with the super fun Just Beachy collection from Simple Stories. I have always been a big fan of creating water-themed layouts, and I think it goes all the way back to my childhood and how I would spend every waking minute in the water. And even though I've grown up, I've always been that water-loving kid at heart. So naturally, creating water-themed layouts have always been something I love to do. It works out well for me that I've got a son that loves the water as much as I do, so I always have fun underwater photos of him. To begin, I'm going to adhere this large splash circle to the center of my layout. And this is actually a sun cut file, but the edges of it looked like waves to me, so I thought if I used the right paper and added the right details to it, it would look like a big splash circle. Then to fill in the center, I'm using a pattern paper that has fish all over it. It's actually the back side of the paper I used for the splash circle, so that worked out well. So I'm going to kind of create the look of a fishbowl in the center, so this pattern paper was perfect for that. Simple Stories always has these fun packages of chipboard photo frames, and there was one that is a life preserver, and that was so perfect for this layout and the idea I had for this design. I'm using a photo of my son Jackson hanging upside down over the edge of the pool, and this frame is just so very perfect for it. I love how the pink stripes match his pink goggles. So I am adhering this down to the center of this splash design, and I'm using foam adhesive so it has dimension and really stands out in the center of this design. I decided to add some stitch details to the design. First, I'm going to add some pencil lines to serve as a guide for where I will pierce the holes before I stitch. I almost always start from a pencil line. It just makes it easier to get perfect placement, which is necessary for me because I'm a perfectionist when it comes to details like this. So for the outer edge of this splash design, I am lightly sketching the pencil line about 1/8 of an inch from the edges. For the circles, I used a template that I cut with my silhouette and traced around those. Next, I place a foam mat under my layout and start piercing holes along the pencil lines with my paper piercer. I usually shoot for holes that are spaced somewhere between 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch apart, depending on what I'm stitching. For a design like this that has a lot of curves, I'll go closer to 1/8 of an inch just to ensure that the curves are fluid and not jagged. Then after I have pierced all of the holes, I use an eraser to erase the pencil lines. I'm going to stitch this design with 2 different colors and 2 different styles of stitching. For the white center, I'm going to use white embroidery floss and stitch using a chain link stitch. I want this to be a bold, thick frame around this circle, so I'm using all 6 strands of the embroidery floss. To stitch a chain link stitch, you come up through the next hole, slide your needle under the stitch before, and then go back down the hole you came up. Then you move on to the next hole and come up, slide the needle under the last stitch, and then go back down the hole you came up. And you just keep repeating this until you have the whole design stitched. For the splash circle, I'm using a green that matches the paper, and for this I'll be doing a back stitch with only 3 strands of embroidery floss. This is the most common stitch and amount of thread that I use. With 3 strands, it's so much easier to pull through the holes, and you also stretch the amount of thread you have and how long it will last. For a back stitch, you go up the next available hole and then back down the one behind it. I always tell people to envision the icing on a Hostess cupcake in that looped design. You are moving forward and then looping backwards in that same motion. With the stitching done, now I can move on to adding all of the fun splash and fish details. First, I'm going to add my title piece and some fish die cuts and stickers around the photo and the life preserver frame. I want this to kind of have a fishbowl look, so I'm adding lots of fish to look like they are swimming around that center circle. I'm adhering all of these with foam adhesive. I love using popped up details and the dimension and interest it adds to designs like this. Next, I'm going to start adding lots of droplets that I've cut out of cardstock with my silhouette. I'm adhering lots of smaller ones with foam adhesive around the edges of the splash circle. This is also where I'm going to add lots of those Nuvo droplets. So I want to get these down first so I can see where I want to add in those Nuvo drops. For the larger cardstock droplets, I added some hand stitching on a few of them, and I've layered some smaller ones on top of the larger ones. These will be arranged around the center circle with foam adhesive. I'm adding a few by my title and then to 2 more areas to form a kind of visual triangle around this center design. Now that I have all of these other droplets on the layout, I can start adding my Nuvo droplets. To make these, you squeeze out a drop, then you take a needle and place it in the center of the drop and then drag it out to create the point. For these, because I'm working around a curved design, I drag mine out with a little bit of a curve to it. After each drop, I am wiping the product off of the needle. This stuff will build up pretty quick and you won't get as pointy of a tip on your droplet if you don't clean it off after each use. I'm going to add these droplets all around this splash design. And I'm doing my best to tie them into the curve of the large splash circle and the smaller droplet pieces. You can also vary the size of the droplets depending on how much you squeeze out for the drop. I like to mix it up and do a larger one paired with a smaller one. I'm also going to add some of these droplets on top of the cardstock droplets and then use the needle to drag out the point to match the cardstock droplet. It's such a fun dimensional detail. So the color I always use for these droplets is called Sea Breeze. It's my favorite because it looks so much like actual water when it dries. Now, obviously, you can use any color you want, but these always end up being my go-to color that I use the most. After I have all of those droplets done, next I'm going to add some drops to accent the design. For these, you just squeeze out a single drop in any size that you want. It's super easy and adds even more detail to this splash design. Then the very last detail I'm adding is my journaling, and I am adding it to the top edge of the photo frame. And that completes my layout. If you enjoy creating water-themed layouts like I do, then I highly recommend you give these Nuvo droplets a try sometime. It's a simple yet striking detail that pairs wonderfully with anything water-related. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.